inspiring you to set the marketplace ablaze in partnership with an awesome and limitless God. This is the Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur Podcast, and this isn't business as usual. Here's your host and Chief Fire Igniter, Shay Bynes.
Welcome back to the Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur Podcast. This is your host, Shay Bynes, and our goal here is to inspire you to operate your business completely yielded and in partnership with our awesome and limitless God. My guest today is a member of our Igniters mentoring community. Her name is Teresa Kwon, and she is the founder and CEO of Bakeshop in Austin, Texas. She's also the managing director of Daringly Great Leadership. This is a woman who never thought that she'd be in the food business. But in the year of 2020, God spoke to her heart and told her that she needed to break up with achievement and get back to Him. And from that season, birthed a new business in partnership with Him and her husband that has been a testimony of restoration, of grace, and of favor in so many ways. I love sharing these stories from those who are willing to take on the adventure of pursuing a God idea with faith and diligence and obedience, because that is success. So listen in and enjoy this great testimony, this great story and conversation with Teresa Kwon. Teresa Kwon, how are you, my dear?
Oh, so good. So good. How are you?
Super good. I absolutely love having Igniters family on the podcast. And being able to explore what you guys are up to, doing business partnership with God. You and I had a delightful chat before hitting record about just the last wild few years of your life.
Yes.
And so I just look forward to just kind of sharing with you and having you share with the Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur family, just the goodness, the challenges and all of that, and walking it out with Him. So why don't we start by you sharing just your foundations for entrepreneurship? Like, did you, I know you would share with me that your family, you grew up in a family business. So just kind of track those roots for me. And then when you started your business.
Sure. Actually, so my story starts 3 generations ago in entrepreneurship. So my mother's side, 3 generations of entrepreneurs, and then me. And so I grew up in a family business. It was a store with a food business in the back. And, you know, I'll say this is that it's rough. It's hard. Also being a child of immigrants, born and raised in Texas, it's hard to have grown up with a family business that's just almost all consuming, right? So I had this very early idea of what entrepreneurship and small business ownership is like, and pretty much said, I'm not going to do that. And
not interested in that.
Not interested. Thank you. And so, you know, but it's funny because clearly that's part of what God has destined for me, because that's what I've been doing in now my 40s.
Yeah. So then what made you start your first business, and when did you start it?
Well, my very first business actually was when I was a kid. But
your adult business.
My adult business. So my adult business, I started doing consulting on the side in 2009. And then fast forward to almost 10 years later, so 2018, I started, we're probably going to get into that story, but God made it really clear in many, many ways that I was no longer meant to be in corporate.
So then, let's get into this, because you got one of those Holy Ghost boots out, booted out.
He booted me out.
Of your corporate career. So talk about like, what was God stirring in you, the hesitancy to leave, and then that departure that then led into you kind of going in on your own as a business owner on the consulting side.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, to set the stage a little bit. So I got married a little bit later in life, and later 30s, and, met him overseas, and we moved to the United States. At that time, I had no idea I'd be supporting elder parents that soon in my life, but that's the position I was in. So that's a large reason why, like a lot of the tech startup scene and the salary and trying to, provide for not just our family unit, but overseas with hospital bills, et cetera, played in the mix. So, and yeah, it was a lot of pressure. I was definitely more of the breadwinner because my husband's a chef and, salaries. So yeah, so it's funny because, when I trace my trajectory back, it's like, I feel like I've come back to square one in some ways, because I had been resisting going into corporate for like decades. And then I was in corporate and then I was in startup, and that was just burning me up. Like it's a very, I don't know that it's for everyone. I also don't know that it's by God's design. I'll just leave it at that for that. And so I was working like 100 hours a week. I was still doing mentoring for startup leaders. My husband, meanwhile, was also, full-time working 80 something hours a week in the restaurant, and we barely saw each other. So for me, instead of sitting by myself at home doing nothing, what did I do? I just filled it with more work.
Right.
And so it was, and, very quickly got pulled into senior leadership, and so which AKA means you have no life, and your whole life is basically devoted to the businesses, right? So business, and I wasn't sleeping at night. I was barely sleeping, if at all, working constantly, and it was a heavy tax on my health. But it was even heavier tax on our marriage.
Yeah.
So that's, but it also at that time felt like there was no out, because I had financial obligations, and couldn't just and it wasn't just a mortgage, it's like, there's like people depending on us. So that's kind of the situation I was in, was like,
yeah. So you were at the point where you were feeling like you wanted to leave, but you felt like you couldn't leave.
Yeah, I was feeling stuck, and like I had no choice, and I had to just keep going, right? Like there was no other, and I didn't even have bandwidth in my brain to think that of another option or to look for another job. But I will say that there were some incidents that happened, not just at work, but also at home. There was a big, talking to Shay earlier about this, huge moment that, just kind of like, it's like the record scratching off the, the very manic, pace of things. Yeah. But my husband and I were not doing well. We barely saw each other. I was telling her, I was like, we only saw each other like an hour and 15 minutes at the end of the night after he got off his shift, and literally would fall asleep on the couch, because that's sitting in front of the TV was our only time together, and we were too tired to talk.
Right.
But yeah, we had this huge fight that ended with me puddle on the floor with tears and snot, and just, I remember him saying, he's just like, I don't know who you are anymore, and you are so different, and I don't want this anymore, and I want a divorce. And that just devastated me, because for me and my side was like, I'm doing this because we're supporting your parents, and like, no, I don't want this. And what choice do we have, but like that was definitely an inflection point for us. And I was like, okay, it has to change, and we have to do something different. And so, of course, for me, consulting was the option, and maybe like taking a break and looking for something different was the idea. And that was like probably spring of 2018. And like, I'm going to tell you, the favor fell off that summer, and I was having the hardest time, but I was also like checking out mentally and trying to set up a business on the side. And then one day I walked in to corporate and was, had a meeting scheduled with like a VP of something. And then they sat down and said, okay, well, this is going to be a different conversation. And the conversation went the way of me having to exit the company. And meanwhile, meanwhile, they're like telling me this giant case that they've built up against why I need to leave.
Wow.
I'm laughing and I'm trying to contain my laughter because all I can hear was it's God's mercy. Like God was like, I gave you 6 months for you to choose to do what I said to do.
Yes. Yes.
And then he's like, these people built this ridiculous case, and which has made it funnier to me, and like exiting me. And I like had the like such relief. I mean, there was, I wasn't happy, but I also was just like, yes, thank you for making that way easier for me.
And so then you leave and then find yourself, but you had already started a little bit. You had started.
I started like kind of, dusting off an old website I'd started in 2014. And like, I started kind of getting back into, and what is, I like to call the matrix of entrepreneurship online. So I gave myself 48 hours. I told I knew as I was walking, I was like, 48 hours, you can be upset and, and watch a lot of Netflix or whatever.
And then it's time to dust yourself off.
Yes. And then he's like,
get to this business.
Get back up and go, because this isn't about your devastation. This is about your renewal.
Yeah.
So
that's so good. Yeah. Okay. So now you go into business. You never thought you were going to be an entrepreneur because you were just like, yeah, I was raised in a family business and I'm not too sure about that. But then you end up going into corporate and then having to, got like slavery level hours.
It was so like, seriously, I don't know. It's not healthy.
It wasn't like, that was not good, not healthy. Like the one thing you're trying to avoid, but then you get it in a different setting. Yep. So then you walk into your business as a consultant. Yep. Now, when you did that, did you have this? Because I'm not sure where things were spiritually with you, but did you have this? Were you kind of walking this thing out with God? Were you lending your ear to him to hear kind of how to function and operate in your business as a consultant?
I will say that it was almost like two parallel tracks that had some bridges across.
Okay.
Right. So I didn't even get to share this with you earlier, but I remember still in the fight with myself and, listening to all the podcasts and all the stuff and like, worshiping for like 2 hours in the morning, my God appointment. And then, and then being on these like coaching calls with people and watching online classes, applying that, but also like hearing so clearly from God, like what I need to do. Right. And I remember my first launch, which by the way, this is how insane my brain is, or how big God hates my dreams. Help me hate my dreams. But my first launch, my goal was set for 115K.
Right.
And like the thing is that God, I just like wrote that whole launch plan down, brought it to the people and said, what do you think? And they were like, no, you're not supposed to do that's not how you do it. You need like an email sequence and you need this and you need one page. And I remember I started my launch week and I started it with God's plan. And as I was being coached through my launch, I literally scrapped his plan. And if you go back and look at the sales, when I was doing God's plan, I was on track for 115K. And then I started doing all the things they told me to do, and all my sales went boom.
Wow.
And I remember crying at the end of my launch during my debrief and being like, and like no one there understood. But I was like, I totally did betray God, was like how I felt. Yeah. I was like, God gave me a very clear blueprint on what to do, and I did not listen to him. And that's when I was like, no more. I'm like, no. And I think that's about when I found your podcast too.
I was about to ask when in the trajectory of all this stuff did you find Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur?
One of my friends who is part of Bethel Austin here, she was like, you need to listen to this podcast. And because at that time I was because that's when I was like, okay, I need to do God's way. Yeah. Where are the kingdom business people? You know, like I just was like, where are they? I don't know where they are. And like, just reading all the books and trying to follow the thread. And there's a lot of not great stuff on money in the Christian sphere out there, right?
That's true. Yeah.
And a lot of Christians who are still operating in that space over there. And So, trial and error, all this stuff. And then she sends me your podcast. And the funny thing is that like, I was like, okay, bookmarked it. And I didn't listen for a little bit. And then like, I was scrolling through and it came up and I was Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur, which without identifying, like sounded familiar. It sounded like something else that I had explored and I didn't care for. So I was like, no. And then like, God was like, oh, but is it the same? And I was like, I don't know. And so he was like, well, why don't you figure it out? And so I played it. And I remember like rewinding, rewind again, Siri, rewind 30 seconds, Siri, rewind 5 minutes. Wait, what did she just say? Like, what? Like, who is this person? Like, that's kind of what happened to me. And then I started binging your podcast.
So you start,
because I'm like an all or nothing kind of girl. So
that is so funny. And what year is this, by the way?
2019. Oh,
2018?
2019. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So here you are doing this business. You're doing it. You're finding your rhythm. You're finding you're navigating the tensions, right? But you were seeing an example of when I do this, like God has blueprints for me. And when I do these things with him, I'm seeing progress. And then when I depart away from that, I'm seeing things not the way I had envisioned them. So you're already beginning to see this pattern.
Yes. There was like a point where I don't remember what exactly happened. I think God just gave me, like he had me, visualize where do I want to be? And at that time, like all I could see was mountains. And I was like, oh, okay, well, it's time for a trip. I love to travel. It's my birthday. I always travel around my birthday in October. And I started getting all these really, really random like signs and symbols, kind of like, okay, God, I got you. Go to Switzerland. Like it was a very strange thing. Like I would see random things, like this random carpenter that I got referred to through Bethel. Like he was from Switzerland, like all this stuff with Switzerland. And I went, and I remember when we were there in the mountains and hearing him say like, this mountaintop experience is going to be given to you by me. It's not something where you get to climb. Like it's not by your power. He was like, I gift it to you. The mountain, I also gift it to you.
Yes.
Like, and so I remember hearing that and then coming back to Austin, and I just felt like this freedom to break away entirely, like literally just say, I don't need to do that. Yeah, sure. I have lots of degrees and masters and certificates and all this experience and a resume that tells me I'm an expert at this. But that doesn't mean that's what God has for me to do, or that that's the mountain he is gifting me. And so I burned it all down, Shay. Like the course is gone. I think that website is pretty much gone. Like, I don't even know what to do with that list. Like all the things are gone. Like and everyone's like, no, I'm like, no, it's pretty much done. Like, we're not going to do this anymore. Because I realized that everything I was teaching was the playbooks, not from God. I was trying to teach a little bit. It's hard to teach.
To do a little bit here, like, but yeah.
But I was trying to teach the playbooks from corporate. And I realized that I'm like proliferating non-kingdom economics, right? Non-kingdom business. And I don't want to do it anymore. So I just like burned it all down.
Wow.
And then just started hearing from God. And it was a very different message, which he started telling me at the end of, I guess, fourth quarter 2019. It's all about local. And I'm like starting to share with people. I'm starting to like do coffee dates and like gatherings and things like people who are in business, like, or like women and locally. And everyone's just like, can we just do a Zoom meeting next time? Like, this is pre-Zoom era, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, but there's something about being in person and being connected locally with people. Like, that's what the next season is about, was what he was telling me. And everyone thinks I'm insane. You know?
You're like, no, it's the internet. It's global. It's worldwide. What are you talking about? Why are we doing meetings face-to-face and focusing on local?
Exactly. So I started burning it all down. And it was crazy because I spent like a year building it all up. And one of the things that I know for a fact over and over. And one of the metaphors I use, and I love metaphors, is that when you're building something, like if you're building a house and you build a foundation, like you can't later build a 6-story house on a 1-story foundation. You have to build a solid foundation that's going to fit your vision. And the foundation that I was building on, that business, was like not even solid. Meanwhile, like was not going to sustain me through whatever's next. So he basically said, we're starting from scratch.
We're shutting that down. Mm-hmm. And then he starts talking to you about local. So now we're at the end of 2019. So this is just a few months prior to a global pandemic. And so now what was God now? So now on the other side of burning that down and now him talking to you about local, what's kind of birthed out of that? Like what was going on then?
So I remember feeling like God was saying like downshift it all and coast. Right. And so I'm like, okay, downshifting, I'm downshifting, which is very opposite of, me.
You're usually going in acceleration mode.
Yeah, I'm like a classic overachiever, high achiever, more, gotta do better. Like even if I do this, I have to outdo, or it's not like I have to outdo it. It's just I have this, what I found at the beginning of 2020, God said, he's like, you're addicted to the high of achievement. You need to break up with achievement and get back with me. And I was like, ooh, like, so the prize, he's like, the prize is me. The prize is not whatever thing you just like accomplished. So at the beginning of 2020, he's just like, so this is the year of you breaking up with achievement. And I was, I fought it a little bit, but by that time I was like, really? I can like not do all those things. That sounds amazing. And I heard, a podcast episode where Brene Brown was talking about how like everyone's so bigger, better, and further, faster. And she's like, I'm kind of more like slower and closer. And I remember hearing that and being like, yes.
That's what he was inviting you into.
For 2020. Yep. Yeah. And he's like, scrap all the goals. Number 1 is health. And number 1 is family, period. God, family, health. That's it. That's all you focus on. And I like slimmed my life down like nobody's business. It felt so good. It felt so light.
That's what I was going to ask. Like, were you like, oh, but I want to talk about business? Or but it sounds like you were like, oh, this sounds amazing. Like,
oh no, by that point, I was like, really? I can not have to do the 10,000 things on my list and it's okay.
We're happy to embrace this word he gave you.
Yeah.
To focus on, what was it? Health,
family, God. Done.
Health, family, God. Like this is the season. And this is right before pandemic hits.
Yep. So when the pandemic hit, I mean, I didn't say this much last year because people would be mad, but I felt prepared for the pandemic.
Right.
Emotionally. I mean, not 1,000%, but like I felt downshifted and ready and satisfied in a lot of ways with the simple, slower life.
Right.
And I think
that people were forced into that had to adjust.
Exactly. Most people got the whiplash of having to like everything just stopped. Right.
Yeah.
And for me, I'd already been downshifting for 6 months, and then he's like, oh, but like, we're really downshifting, so I'm already like making sourdough and planting and all that stuff before, like, making gardens before the pandemic. Right. And yeah, it felt like I had finally shed decades of having to feeling like I needed to earn love, respect, recognition, all of those things. Like I realized, oh, but that's not why I'm here.
Right.
That's not my purpose. And I am already loved. I am already worthy. I'm already all of those things. And I don't need to do a darn thing. Like, and that's kind of the headspace I was in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then your husband loses his job, because we got to bring your husband back into this, because now everything after this is just the goodness of what God did in the midst of family and restoration. So your husband then gets laid off from his job that he'd been, I assume he was still working that 80 hours a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, I'm not going to lie. I literally just transferred all of my, crazy, I might have like done 10 hours less a week. Right. But like I was crazy manic working in my business as well. So like that was definitely not grace. That was very much grind. So
right. So you and your husband, even before he told you to slow down, you had just moved from grinding it out on the inside of corporate to now grinding it out in your business, but also dealing with the tension of just like, I want to be led by you, but just kind of in the midst of all that tension. Yes. Then he tells you to slow it down. You're down gearing, you're making sourdough, you're gardening, you're focusing on family, on God, and on health. Then your husband loses his job.
Yeah. So he's in the hospitality industry. He's a chef. And he was one of the very first people laid off at the beginning of the pandemic in beginning of March. And, it was definitely a blow for him. So for him, it was the whiplash, right? For me, I mean, I think he would come home and be like, what happened to you? Like, who are you? I mean, in a good way, right?
Right.
So, but he's still manic, and then suddenly, boom. And that was definitely a big stop for all of us.
Yeah.
But that's pretty much the beginning of this next season that we're in.
That's right.
Yeah.
Which has been beautiful. So talk to me about kind of after your husband loses his job. I mean, I'm thinking you had already downgraded on the business side. So you weren't focused on business, and your husband loses his job. So for you, was there any stress around like finances for you, for you on your side?
Girl,
were you
yes.
concerned?
Yes. And I was running a small mastermind by that point, which, I was like, it's all about, because I had already heard like build strong relationships.
Okay.
Right.
Local relationships.
Relationships. And so, formed a small mastermind that I was leading, and very different. God's design and structure are very different than most masterminds out there.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing I had one client that I think finished around March. I did one-on-one, client work. And and by that point too, like I was like, do I still pay for the online hosting of my class? Like, it's over, it's done. So that was the income that I had. Then it was his income, but then we were in like major stress zone. I was like, oh no, like, wait, what, God, like this? No, is this your plan? Because we have like no income coming in now. Like this is not good. And very quickly, my friends and even the ladies in my mastermind, because like my husband, his first love is baking.
Yeah.
And he bakes for me because I'm gluten-free. And so, that's part of our love story, and how he got really motivated to like bake me delicious things that I can't eat elsewhere. And so, we're stuck at home. This is the no toilet paper, no yeast era. And he's just like, want bread? I'll make you bread. You want Twinkies? I'll make you Twinkies. Like, let's make some muffins. And then he just starts making all this stuff in the kitchen. And I post on my Instagram, and my friends are like, oh yeah. So 8 years ago, or for 8 years, you guys have talked about maybe doing a gluten-free bake shop. Like, hey guys, like you're home. Why don't you do this? And I'm like, no, we're not. No.
Why didn't you want to do that? Because you have a whole thing around food business from growing up, and you didn't want anything to do with it.
Of baggage. Also, because I'm a business strategist.
Like I'm a business strategist. I'm not a big shop owner.
Like, heck no. No. I was like, no. The math. I was like, are you kidding me? We're going to be killing ourselves and making like very little return, and we can't pay the bills with that.
So you felt like you would be walking into a grind. If we do this bake shop thing, then we're going to have to work like crazy people to make very little money.
That's right. Because that's what I grew up with. And also like industry standard, if you look at it, it's about, restaurants.
It's a tough business.
It's a tough business. 7% is like the all-star average of the net profit return for a restaurant. and most people run in the red, which is what's happening. Why we're seeing the bottom of the iceberg of food businesses going down. Knowing these statistics, I was like, "Are you kidding me? Like, we are not doing a bake shop." Like, and that's partly why. Like, when I did the math, I was like, "We have all these thousands of dollars in bills I have to pay. Like, we can't crank out enough bread to like pay for the hospital bills. You know what I mean?" So it was resistance the whole time, and then here we are, and they're like, "So, what else are you doing?" And so finally. Actually, to be honest, my husband was playing too many video games for my taste.
Like, you said yes to the bake shop to keep your husband from playing video games.
That was hard. I'm going to confess the truth. Yes, that
confession. This is on a Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur podcast exclusive confession.
Yeah, because people are different, right? Like, and he's the type that is like, he's the type that's great. If you tell him these are your duties, he's like gonna do it. He's gonna do a great job at it. He's very steady. I think Kim Scott from her book, she differentiates superstars and rock stars are different kinds of employees. He's a rock star. Like I'm the superstar. Yeah. It was a good mix. God put us together, but yes. I'm like, no more video games. Do something productive, So I was like, okay, because I'm still running my mastermind and like trying to figure out what am I doing with this business. Like God's talking to me about like, all that stuff. And
were you even consulting God about the decision around the bake shop, or had you already decided and you weren't even engaging God around this decision?
Oh, I was a complete shutdown. Made a case about like 10-foot book deep, and I was just like, and on top of that. It's like, this ain't happening. Like, I'm not going to do it. Like, it sounds amazing. And it's part of what actually gave my husband a lot of courage about immigrating to the States. Like, he's from Korea. So, but I was like, the math doesn't add up, God. Like, I'm not going to do this. So I was like, okay, well, we're home anyways. And so, and like, at least we can help our neighbors. Maybe, I don't know, maybe who wants this? So neighborhood Facebook group. And I wrote, hey guys, so my husband got laid off. But, he does bake. And I don't know if there's other gluten-freers or if you're out of yeast or whatever, but we can make extra loaves when my husband makes bread this week, if anybody wants some, or he also makes other stuff like this. And like, boom, 60 like replies happened instantly. We were a really tight neighborhood. And they're like, oh, send me the menu. I'll totally buy it. Like, oh my gosh, that sucks. Blah, 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 blah. And I was like, what? Oh no. Now we have to do this business.
You're like, now it starts.
Yeah,
we're about to have to do all this work.
Yeah, it was exciting too. It was exciting because I was like, no one's really going to want, this. And I already remember 10-foot book business case of why this won't work ever. And then 60 replies within 10 minutes. And so I was like, okay, well, I guess we're going to do this. So I made this menu of 4 items. I mean, having all my process background and stuff, I made a very simple, no dummy process.
Right.
Very low tech.
Yeah.
And I made this ugly PDF of 4 menu items,
Kept it simple.
Put it up there and took email orders and PayPal Venmo kind of thing. That was it. And we made our first sales for that week. And it was $200 we weren't going to have if we, that was our first set. So we were really wow, okay, this is cool. And then in my brain, I was like, until he goes back to work.
You're thinking this'll work until my husband goes back to work.
That's right.
But let's see it is. We're in 2021 now. By the time this comes out, it'll be September 2021. But today is August 31st, 2021. And you are still doing this business. And tell me what has God done with this bake shop that you were really uncertain about?
Oh, yeah.
Tell me the testimony of what God's done.
Wow. First of all, where we are today, this is our full-time gig. And Yeah, that little like patch between jobs or whatever, unemployment, like 4 items. No, like we have a full blown business, and it has been the most incredible God journey. Seriously, one of the best God journeys I've had. Like testimony after testimony of His favor. We are collaborating with some of honestly, the most respectable like businesses in town. Even like some of the finest hotels have asked us to supply them our products. I don't even know why. I'm like, oh, but we're nobody. Like that's kind of like, I'm like, why would you reach out to us? Like that's kind of.
You haven't been going door to door. You haven't been going door to door to
people,
these folks and trying to get business.
We sell out every week. It's craziness. We have now developed. We went from breads and muffins and cookies to then developing. I feel like God gave us a recipe. God gave us a recipe that is mochi donuts.
Ooh.
And basically, I was Instagram scrolling during lockdown, and I was like, got my eyelashes. Honey, you want to make this for me? And then same thing. It's like I posted on my personal Instagram, and someone's like, "Where'd you get that? I'll buy it." And then that has now turned into our multiple 6-figure business, where we
from the donuts.
Yeah.
So that one menu item of, would you call them mochi donuts? Mochi donuts is now a 6-figure revenue generator all by itself without all the other stuff. Wow. Now, so this is really interesting because so this is what I want to know, because you had a lot of book knowledge about business and scaling it. Mm-hmm. You had so much book knowledge. It made you not want to do this business at all. 100%. So talk to me about, and then you fast forward to now, there's partnerships and there's things where people are finding you and discovering you and all of these things. But talk to me about the process of walking this thing out with God and just this partnership and the burning of the books that you did on the other stuff. There's been like another burning of books in terms of how this particular type of business would work, because you guys are operating out of this kingdom economics, kingdom economy, the favor of God as you're partnering with Him. So talk to me about some of the things that might be really standard in your business that you guys are like, yeah, we don't do that. Like that, we don't do that because God's led us another way. Like break down for people who don't know this industry or whatever, and or people who do know this industry, like break down the differences of what your book knowledge would tell you and your book knowledge and experience of seeing other business types this way and what God's doing with you guys and how He's leading you.
Yeah. I mean, standard for food business, it means a website, probably some, at that time, we barely had any. I think I had made some old Facebook and Instagram account. I think we had like less than 170 followers. I remember because I snapshotted it. Less than 170 followers on Instagram when we were making 6 figures last year.
Wait. You said that you had 174 Instagram followers when you were already doing 6 figures from in the bake shop.
Yeah.
Okay. So that blasts the myth that one must have a super strong social media presence before you can get any really good sales.
Yep.
Okay.
And we didn't have a website.
You didn't have a website?
We didn't have a website till maybe December. And even then it's like, if you go, there's like very little.
So Teresa, these people were all contacting you via old-fashioned email?
No, we actually were using Instagram.
So your Instagram page that only had 174 followers, people were contacting you via that page.
I used DM. I mean, I'm
through the DMs.
Yeah. So I'm like the girl who like has been on a computer since she was age 3, right? In the 70s. So like, I'm very tech. I used to build out intricate e-commerce stuff, like product manager, all of the digital marketing, $100,000 a month in ads and all that stuff. Okay. But here we started with PDF of ugly PDF,
ugly PDF email, menu with 4 items,
right? Email and Venmo that's how we started. And then we still didn't have a website or an ordering platform or really a menu. I just posted the menu on our stories and people would order over DM. And I had just ended up creating a process where it's like, I'm still borrowing like things that I learned, right? So I ended up systematizing auto saved replies.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But like literally went through an ordering process. I mean, it was kind of insane. And I think back to it is that I took all those orders over DM. So, yeah. And then at that time, people picked up at our house. So that was our process.
So people were coming to your house and picking up their orders. You're still out of your home bakery now. You're looking at you guys are praying about and looking at buildings and stuff like that. But you're in your home now. So people come to your home and pick up their orders.
Well, not now. Now we do pop-ups.
Now you do pop-ups.
Yes. Now we do pop-ups.
Nice.
Yeah, so we've moved away since then. But like when we first began, everyone was picking up from our house.
Right.
And it was funny because some people would be like, you're like the donut speakeasy that no one knows about, but if you know, you know.
Right.
And and that's yes. And there's some things that happened that had us, again, God kicked us out of our house, like in terms of like having people pick us up.
Right.
But I remember we pivoted to doing parking lot pickups. So we would go to the back of Walgreens.
So you pick up here.
We'd have a 30-minute window. I mean, we made things seriously, the fact that people did backflips and, all the things to come get their mochi donuts still blows my mind. We had a 30-minute window. You can come meet us at a parking lot.
Right.
To pick up your mochi donut order.
Wow.
That's what we did. And people would do it. And we still were like selling out nonstop. And now we do pop-ups. And have done collaboration pop-ups with different places around town. And that's how we've been operating. And it's exponential growth.
And you guys have had people finding you guys and reaching out to you for collaborations. And
right. Yeah, it's crazy because like it's like things like the call that we got yesterday. It's like one of those things where we drive by and we're like, wouldn't that be so cool if we did a pop-up with them or some kind of collaboration, like in our dreams? Like that was
right.
How we got. And then I got the email and I'm on the phone with this guy and I'm like, how? I'm like, I've been going to you guys since the 90s. Like, this is like, y'all are like one of my like favorite businesses in town, also local.
Yeah.
And yeah. So
that's so cool.
So hotel, like the finest hotels. I was like, why would this like 5-star hotel reach out to us for our products? Or like there's this giant comedy festival coming to town and people want us to cater that. Like there's these major galas of like for fundraising, people want us to cater that. Or like, different businesses who are reaching out, like really great businesses.
Yeah.
And also food influencers. PS, like all the things that I was taught on how to growth marketing, I'm not really using them. Like right. I'm not paid one partner. They all come to us and they ask us, they buy with their own money, which most influencers don't. They
right.
buy with their own money and they promote our stuff. Like,
wow.
And they like, and in the news and the magazines, like we've even gotten national like media people reaching out to us. And I'm like, I don't even know who we are. Like,
wow. How has God been? What has God been instructing you to do in terms of your role? We see the wondrous works that He is doing in the midst of all of this stuff. How is He, since He doesn't have you doing the types of things that would be the standard things? What are you focused in on right now? What does that look like for you? Like,
well, I mean, wow, we're kind of in this transition period, but like really doing all the things still. It's just us two doing all the things.
So it's still just the two of you.
Yeah, it's still just the two of us doing all the things. And
wow.
Every time like we think about, I mean, some of it has been fear in the past, but some of it is also like Him saying not yet. Like we get so many invitations and He's made it really clear the things that it has to line up with. And yes. It's so black and white that we say no 99% of the time.
Yes.
To invitations and opportunities and even things that we could do in our business.
Yes.
Right? Things that would be standard in what you should do in your business. Right. Like He's been like, no, focus on the 5% of things that's going to give you the 95% and the rest is for rest.
Yeah. I love that. And it's like, because when you say yes to a whole bunch of things that you could do or that look good or whatever, then we fall into the grind again. Right. And it's just like, and you don't want to be in that place. You guys are in such a beautiful place here. Now you got to tell me, so your husband must be like overjoyed at the fact that he's getting to do what he does now. And he doesn't have to, he's not working that same type of.
Yeah. And he, we were featured in this photo essay for a journalist last year. And we wrote, it's like, how did 2020 change you? Or how did the pandemic change you? And my husband he's very little, like not a man of many words. And he wrote his essay, probably more words than I've ever seen him write, even a card or a letter to me. And he wrote how before he used to feel like a robot. And he like every day would go in and just almost like hate his existence, that he couldn't, like he just would go show up for work, do what he was told, like work so hard and be so tired, go to shower, go to sleep, wake up and do it all over again. And then now he feels like he finally got his American dream. And I will say, here's another note for people who come from like developing countries or third world countries, like, and having lived there, like in Korea for 4 years, I was born and raised here and I lived there. It's a very different, I think that we don't realize in the States, like the conditions that we have here.
Yeah.
And then also just the ethos of like what's possible.
Yes.
And in Korea, it's very not possible. Like that's pretty much what you're ingrained to believe. And you almost say like a mantra. Like that was one of the things I had to break him of. And so for him to go from it would never happen, literally like not even be able to say in your dreams kind of thing.
Yeah.
To saying like having a dream and watching it unfold that this is now your life.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about a God testimony for him.
Totally.
Like, and I'm like, I always tell him, I'm like, yeah, well, if you like, I always said he lived under a rock. If he really did lived under a rock in Seoul, and then he had to make me go there and find him. Like I'm the princess, right? Like, yeah. But I was like, that's how much God loves you. Like that he knew you had bigger dreams, that he put like, I love that saying I shared before, like that God didn't make a man and put a dream in him. He had a dream and wrapped a man around it. And that was the dream for this, guy that comes from a very simple family, basically living under a rock, very not exposed. He even had a passport or been on a plane, and he was 30 something when I met him. So for me, it was like mind blowing to now having, traveled a lot of places in the world, having his whole world change, worldview change, and like even his idea of God change.
Yes.
Right, on what's possible. And so, so,
that's so good.
So alive. I mean, both of us being able to address health stuff and
to see each other for more than an hour a day.
Oh, well,
come on.
Like 24/7.
Like, you guys are on the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, we're on the other end of the spectrum now. But
I need to get an hour and a half away.
Yes. I was like, I'll be in the bedroom and you be downstairs. No, we don't say that. But like, we have a healthy balance.
Right.
But I mean, our marriage, when I think about that horrible conversation that we had and, being a puddle on the floor and where we are today, almost actually 2.5 years later, I mean, that's a God testimony.
It is a total God testimony.
I don't know that I could have ever conceived that this would be the answer to my desperate, like, God help me prayer,
Yes.
But it's
so good.
You can't, I think that's one of the things I am learning is that, you can be Einstein and have had all the experience and the book knowledge of the world, and you still probably can't fathom what God can do and what God has planned, and that he has had this plan from the beginning of time, right? Before you were even born. So that's just like, when you go there, it's just like, how can you not like just the awe of like what is possible with God, and how for so long, I reduced God and rejected God's plan for us because I was throwing the book at him because, I know better. Like building up a case and saying like, no, this is not going to be profitable enough for us. Like, this is not going to happen, honey. Like, and it makes me sad that I was, the one probably putting on the brakes. It's also probably part of God's story with me.
It is. Well, that's the thing. All of this is goodness and growth and redemption and restoration, like for both of you in so many different ways. So it's like, it's so good.
And it's insane too, because all of these food businesses that are tanking right now.
Yeah.
And we've gotten, because I'm such a relational person, like gotten to know a lot of food business owners in town, been receiving great mentorship, the good kind. And I get the questions all the time. Like, some people challenge me with the world's playbook. And then other people who are like, I still don't get how what is going on with your business.
Right.
And when I try to explain to them, like, it's not anything I could have ever made up. Like, it blows their mind, like a good friend of mine, she's in food PR and she's not a believer. She was a former believer. She says she's agnostic now, but we talk God because she knows I'm a God girl. And like every time I send her a text message and I was like, oh my gosh, screenshot this. I just got this email. And she's like, what? Like, you can't make this up.
Yeah,
like,
it really is. It really is a test. It reveals God's glory and goodness.
Exactly. It really does. And I love that. And two, like, for us, what keeps us going is our mission to not just make gluten-free stuff and not just make donuts, but like truly, truly, it's a mission to spread joy. And that's part of the cultural transformation that the message and what we want to offer our city, our home, right? And prior to 2020, I was obsessed with not being home. I was more connected with people not at home. I wasn't serving the city like I used to, but like him reconnecting us. And and it's funny because like all the believers who find us will always go like, I know you're a believer. Like there's no, but I don't talk Christianese on our stuff, but like everything, our content and how we share about our process and what we're trying to build and trying to build a different business model that we hope that will like really displace maybe even like the really unhealthy business models, food business models that are out there that compromise family and health, right? I mean, that's the first thing to go. They always say that, like, that's the rite of passage. Like, that's the cost. Like, and I'm like, why is that the standard? Because that's not God's standard. That's not God economics, right? That's not kingdom economics. And so, there's like other things that we're doing. It's not just about making yummy mochi donuts and thousands of flavors and, making people smile and laugh and have really connect in terms of goodness. It's also like, we want to give hope that there is a path of incredible success. That's a whole nother bucket. What is success, right? What is the success that's defined by kingdom that does not require the grind? Yeah. And our story is 1,000%. I mean, let's reel back to that March when he got laid off and we ended up going to the mountains for a little bit. It was incredible way to start the pandemic for us. But that's when I I audiobook listened to Grace Over Grind. And I listened to it 3 times while we were there. And that is so the story of where we are now. And every time we try to grind, everything grinds to a halt. Like nothing.
When you try to grind, it grinds to a halt.
Yeah, like it does. I'm serious. It's like nothing works. I'm stressed. Like we are not getting sales. We're not like getting the favor feels lifted. And I mean, it feels temporary, but like I'm always like, oh, okay, we did that again. Or like Teresa, oh, you're trying to like overthink this. Like it's just stop and ask God. And 9 out of 10 times, it's so backwards from the world that like I'm not just dumbfounding myself, but my colleagues, the people even in like church are like, this doesn't make sense. And I'm like, I know, but I'm doing what God's telling me to do. So like, and it's working.
I love it. Oh my gosh. This is so good. I'm so glad you shared your story. This is just such goodness. And I'm looking forward. So I got to have you back on the podcast again in the future, because you guys are, because it's going to just be a even more wild story over what he does over the next like 9 months to a year and all of that. So that'll be fun to have you come back so we could talk food industry and local impact and the continued grace over grind story in this industry for you and your husband. But so good. Now, okay. So where do people go if they want to connect? The people that are local, you're there in Austin.
That's right.
You want to show up at pop-ups? Like, how do people get connected to you, Teresa?
So it's Boom Bakeshop, which I would say most people pronounce it Bomb Bakeshop, BOM, bakeshop.com. But we're also on Instagram, Facebook, like that. We try to, please, I would say Instagram stories. I try to keep it fun. There's a lot of people who just follow our stories. So I just like, it's a hard time. Let's laugh. Let's have a good time, but also like speak truth. And so there you can find us. We're not at a point where we're shipping. And I don't know if that's part of God's vision for us, because he's been so clear about being local and blessing the city. So, but we're excited. There's so much that is still on hold to roll out that he's given us blueprints for. So it's kind of overwhelming sometimes, but it's also like, wow, God is the master, architect of things that we can never fathom. Yes. And I love being able to be a main player in his story, in our story. And I'm excited to see what's next. Yeah. And the more kind of butterfly effect impact of this message of joy in a time of a lot of grief and pain.
Yeah. That's so good. Teresa, thank you. So good talking to you today.
Yeah, really enjoyed it. Thanks for letting me share. And like I said at the beginning, for me, whoever's listening, if I can share this, is that whoever's listening to this, I just want to encourage you that if there is a dream, a dormant dream or a dream under the mat or on the bookshelf that you've been sitting on, that was the dream that God had and wrapped you around it. And I just want to say that all the things that tell you that it's impossible or that it's not the right sensible choice for you financially, that was my big blocker, that au contraire, because who would know that a donut would give you would give us what we have today. And so try it.
Try it.
I dare you to take on God's dream. Let's go.
I love it. I really, really appreciated Teresa's story that she shared today. And I just love the faithfulness of God to redeem, to restore, and just cause all things to work together for our good and for his glory. So such goodness. I have with me Mr. Bynes, our CEO. What's going on, Phil?
Hey, my love.
Hey. So I think someone submitted a suggestion that was like Mr. Bynes tidbits.
Tidbits with Mr. Bynes.
Tidbits with Mr. Bynes. All right. Share your takeaways from today's episode.
All right. Let me ask you this before I get started. Do you want me to run through them straight through, or you want me to share one and then let you respond? How do you want to do this today?
Share them one at a time. Let's see how this goes.
All right. Okay. So the first one I have here is when God gives you a clear blueprint, you have to shut out all contrary voices.
Yeah. God is the source. Everyone and everything else is a resource.
Yeah. I'm not saying that you shut out all voices, just the contrary ones. He gave you clarity. He clearly gave you a blueprint.
Yes.
And what they're bringing is confusion, and God's not the author of confusion. And so I like how she talked about that in her story. It's like, all the extras and the gurus was like, that's not how things are done. And it knocked her off of course. Already on course.
I think one of the things I thought was really cool about that, by the way, is how I really feel like that's God in his grace to demonstrate for her like so quickly, like, this is the evidence of my grace and favor on you doing what I instructed you to do, and to show her how things pulled back. You know, she shared that story. That's happened to her more than once. She shared that happening in her business twice during this conversation. And I'm just like, that's just like the goodness of God, honestly, to just display that in such a obvious fashion to keep her on track.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And the second thing I have here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share exactly what she said first, and then I'm going to share with you what I heard and what she said. Okay. So what she said was, you can't build a 6-story building on a 1-story foundation. Immediately what I heard was, you can't build a kingdom edifice on top of a worldly foundation.
Come on, Bynes.
That was a tidbit.
That was more than a tidbit. That's good. That's good. That's good. Okay, I like that one. What's the third one?
Third one. Okay. When you are faithful with what God shows you, you will far exceed what the standards are.
Yeah.
So that's why the world can't see what you're trying to do. It doesn't make sense to them because when you're going off of a God blueprint of what God says, it far exceeds what the world can do in their addition system, right? When we tap into kingdom economics, it's really a system of multiplication. You know, in the world, we're adding things, you know, it's addition. So they can't see it.
I love it. So good. Such a great conversation. Just so many aspects of her story were just so good. You guys, before we let you go today, I want to remind you, so Teresa Kwon, who you just heard from, is actually part of our Igniters mentoring community. And right now, this week, we actually have the doors open. We only open up registration like this a couple times a year. So right now, this is your opportunity to join us in the Igniters mentoring community. If you're a listener of this podcast and you're like, I want to walk this out and I want to have mentoring and I want to have community surrounding me as I learn to grow in this, no matter where you are right now. And you want to grow in this doing business in partnership with God, led and empowered by the Holy Spirit. You want to be kingdom driven in your approach to doing business. You want to have a greater kingdom impact through the work that you do. If that's you, join us in Igniters mentoring. You can get the details at kingdomdrivenentrepreneur.com/igniters and go ahead and sign up because registration closes this week and won't be open for quite some time. Mr. Bynes, before we go, is there anything else that you need to share?
No, that's it.
All right. Well, you guys, we will look forward to talking to you more next week on the next episode of the Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur Podcast. Take care, God bless, and see you in Igniters.
Thanks for joining us on the Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur Podcast. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today, we encourage you to subscribe and spread the word. And don't forget, you can gain access to even more resources, plus a thriving community of fire starters by visiting our website at kingdomdrivenentrepreneur.com.